Before there were banks, before coins filled pockets, there were sticks. For over 700 years, England's economy ran on carved pieces of wood. They tracked taxes, debts, and royal payments long before paper money. This is the story of tally sticks, the wooden ledger that built a kingdom and burned it down. A tally stick was simple but ingenious. Made from hazelwood or willow, each notch represented a sum, a penny, a shilling, or a pound. The stick was then split lengthwise. One half went to the creditor, the other to the debtor. No two splits were ever the same, making forgery nearly impossible. It was medieval security, carved in wood. Around the year 1100, King Henry I made tally sticks official. Coins were scarce and few people could read or write. So the royal treasury, known as the exchequer, adopted tallies to record taxes and debts. Each stick became proof of obligation, a physical promise to pay. Soon something remarkable happened. People began trading the sticks themselves, using them as money. A tally owed by the crown had value because everyone trusted the king would pay. You could sell it, trade it, or use it to pay your own taxes. Tally sticks became England's first credit system, centuries before banks or paper notes. A wooden bond, backed by royal promise. For everyday people, tallies were part of life. A farmer could pay rent with one. A merchant could settle a trade. Even taverns accepted tallies from trusted patrons. It all worked on a single foundation: trust. Trust in people, trust in the crown, trust in the system itself. By the 1800s, paper money ruled. Tally sticks were abolished in 1826, but thousands of them remained, stacked in the cellars beneath Parliament. Relics of a wooden economy. Eventually, the government decided to burn them. On October 16, 1834, the fires grew too hot. Flames spread through the flues, igniting the wooden floors above. Within hours, the Palace of Westminster was in flames. The inferno that destroyed Parliament began. With tally sticks, a poetic end, history reduced to ash. Today, only a few tally sticks survive, fragile reminders of a forgotten system that once held a kingdom together. The word stock comes from the tally stick's stock half. The exchequer became the treasury, and the very idea of government bonds, debt that can be traded, began with these simple pieces of wood. When we talk about blockchain or digital ledgers, we're chasing the same idea the tally stick achieved 1,000 years ago. A system everyone can trust without needing to trust each other. The technology has changed. The idea hasn't. Money is, and always has been, a story of belief. A promise recorded somewhere that we all agree to honor. From wood to paper to pixels, the story of money is the story of trust. And sometimes the simplest technology can hold a civilization together. And when the smoke cleared and the wooden ledgers were gone, something new began to take their place. The world was changing. Trade was expanding, cities were growing, and men no longer dealt only in sacks of grain or bundles of wool. They dealt in promises written not on wood, but on paper. The fall of the tally stick marked the rise of another kind of ledger, one far more fragile, yet infinitely more powerful. In the centuries that followed, the memory of wooden finance faded, but its spirit lived on. Every new financial tool, from paper notes to digital credit, was in its essence a descendant of the tally stick. The Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance. Merchants from Florence, Venice, and Amsterdam began keeping ledgers bound in leather instead of carved in wood. Columns of ink replaced notches. Account books replaced bundles of sticks. But the principle remained unchanged. Two sides, one transaction, both bound by trust. And as trade grew beyond villages and kingdoms, across oceans, across continents, that trust had to evolve. Wood could no longer hold the weight of empire. In London, the same city where tally sticks once filled the exchequer's vaults, something extraordinary was happening. Goldsmiths, once trusted with storing precious metals, began issuing handwritten receipts to their clients. At first, these slips were simple claims, proof of ownership. But before long, people began to trade the receipts themselves. They realized the paper was easier to move than the gold it represented. And in that moment, money became a symbol, a token of belief detached from the thing it described. It was not so different from a tally stick, really. Both were promises, both carried value only because people agreed they did. The goldsmith's receipts evolved into banknotes. The banknote evolved into credit, and credit eventually became the heartbeat of modern finance. But each evolution brought a new challenge: how to maintain trust when the evidence of value became less tangible. In the days of tally sticks, a man could hold his half in his hand, feel the wood, match the cut, and know the truth. But paper could be forged, ink could fade, and so new systems emerged: seals, signatures, watermarks, and eventually the weight of law itself. The government, once represented by the king's mark on wood, now stamped its authority on paper. The Bank of England, born in 1694, carried forward the same principle as the exchequer centuries earlier: that the strength of money lies not in its material, but in its credibility. And for the first time, wealth became abstract, a flow of promises rather than possessions. A farmer no longer needed to touch his payment. A merchant no longer had to see his gold. The ledger held it all, the invisible architecture of trust. Yet even as systems became more sophisticated, the essence remained primitive: belief. Every financial revolution, from the tally stick to the gold standard, from paper notes to electronic balances, has wrestled with one question: what is value if not shared faith? Consider the irony. The more advanced our economies became, the further we moved from anything tangible. What began as a notch in wood, proof of human agreement, became a digital signal, blinking silently across the world. And still, the mechanism of trust is the same. When a medieval clerk split a tally stick, he divided one truth into two parts, one for each side of a deal. When a banker approves a loan today, he does the same, creating value from agreement, promise from potential. We have changed the medium, not the meaning. In truth, the tally stick was never just an accounting tool. It was a philosophy, a recognition that society itself is a shared illusion, held together by faith in systems we create. And like all great inventions, it was born not from genius, but necessity. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Europe had entered a new age of money, the age of paper. Empires spanned continents, ships carried goods and gold across oceans, and markets buzzed with speculation. The world's wealth had never been greater, yet its foundation was more fragile than ever. People could no longer see their wealth. They could only trust it existed somewhere in a ledger held by someone else. And that fragility came with consequences: wars, crashes, panics, all symptoms of belief tested and broken. Every economic collapse, every bubble, every bank run was, in essence, a crisis of faith. For centuries, the British Exchequer had burned tally sticks to balance its books. Now, modern banks burn credibility instead. The wooden system had been physical, slow, human, verifiable. The paper one was faster, riskier, easier to manipulate. Yet even in this fragility, progress thrived. Because what replaced certainty was possibility. Paper money could circulate faster than wood ever could. And with speed came growth. Trade, industry, empire. England, once a kingdom of sticks, became a global powerhouse of finance. The city of London turned into the beating heart of the world's economy. And through it all, the invisible echo of the tally stick remained. The modern check, the bond certificate, the printed note, all descendants of the same ancient logic: split trust, shared proof. The story of the tally stick isn't merely about economics. It's about human nature. We carve our trust into whatever we have at hand: wood, paper, or code. We anchor faith to symbols because we need something to hold. And yet, time and again, those symbols outlive their form. When we look at a balance sheet, or a digital wallet, or the number on a phone screen, we are still reading notches, just modern ones. Centuries may separate us from the medieval clerk at the Exchequer, but we share his dilemma: how to keep track of what we owe each other, and how to believe that the record is true. The tally stick, for all its simplicity, captured that truth better than any algorithm. It was honest in its imperfection, physical in its proof. And perhaps that's why it lasted so long, because it required participation, not blind belief. To trade tallies was to see trust made visible. And yet, as the centuries rolled on, the old lessons faded. The further money drifted from matter, the more fragile trust became. We replaced the wooden split with paper marks, and paper marks with binary digits. Each leap forward brought progress and peril. The tally stick is gone, but its ghost lingers in every financial transaction, in every contract signed, in every line of credit extended, in every debt repaid. We live in an age where value is invisible, numbers shifting through global networks, unseen yet binding. It's a miracle of complexity, born from a medieval simplicity. What began in the dim light of a royal treasury now spans satellites, algorithms, and server farms. And still, it depends on the same fragile thing: belief that the system will hold. As the 18th century dawned, the sound of carving knives and wooden ledgers faded from memory. The age of wood gave way to the age of paper, and with it, humanity took another leap, forward in sophistication, backward in certainty. The world was expanding. Sails filled with wind carried not just goods, but entire economies across the sea. Ships left London, Lisbon, and Amsterdam carrying spices, silver, and sugar. But the true cargo was paper. Receipts, contracts, letters of credit, all promises, written in ink, floating on faith. These fragile sheets of parchment replaced the solidity of the tally stick. No longer did one hold half a truth in hand. Instead, one carried the whisper of value, ink that could vanish in water or flame. Yet these slips of belief built empires. The British East India Company, the Dutch VOC, the Bank of England, all founded on paper, all powered by confidence. A ship might take a year to return with its cargo, but its owners could sell the promise of that cargo today. Paper gave them the power to trade the future. And so, finance became imagination. The tally stick was a record of what was. Paper was a record of what could be. This shift transformed more than markets. It reshaped human thought. For the first time, value could exist in absence, and wealth could multiply without matter. A piece of paper could make a man rich or ruin him, and like the tally stick, it all depended on trust. But now that trust stretched across oceans. In coffee houses and counting rooms, brokers traded slips of parchment like lifeblood. Names like Lloyd's and Barclays emerged, not as traders of goods, but of promises. London became a hive of speculation, a market not of things, but of beliefs. And in that frenzy, the roots of modern capitalism took hold. Profit became untethered from product, wealth from labor, value from the physical. The wooden world of tangible exchange had become a world of abstraction, yet beneath the glitter of global trade, danger brewed. The old rhythm of trust, once slow, measured, and visible, began to quicken. Speculation replaced certainty, greed replaced gratitude, and for the first time, humanity faced a truth it had long avoided. Belief can collapse faster than it grows. Paper burned faster than wood, and when faith caught fire, it spread with terrifying speed. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, markets rose and fell in violent waves. The South Sea Bubble, the Mississippi Scheme, the Panic of 1720, the crash of 1825. Each one a reminder that confidence, once lost, could drag empires to their knees. The tally stick had been crude, but honest. Its notches could not vanish with rumor or panic. Paper, however, paper could lie. Governments learned to print more than they owned. Banks issued notes backed by air, and the world's wealth became a delicate illusion shimmering above the abyss of doubt. Still, progress marched on. Factories rose from fields. Railways stretched across continents. Paper became power, and trust became policy. The 19th century turned money into machinery. The Industrial Revolution did not only forge steel and smoke, it forged the infrastructure of belief. Ledgers, interest, credit, bonds, all invisible gears turning the engines of empire. But deep down, a question lingered. Had the world traded the simplicity of the tally stick for the chaos of complexity? When men held wood, they held truth. When they held paper, they held possibility. And possibility, though powerful, is perilous. By the dawn of the 20th century, the world was more connected than ever. Cables stretched beneath oceans, telegraphs pulsed with coded trust, and banks spanned borders like cathedrals of faith. Every major power stood upon the gold standard, a system meant to restore physical certainty. For every pound, every franc, every mark in circulation, there was gold in vaults to match it. It was a return to solidity, a longing for the tangible truth that the tally stick once offered. But gold, like wood, was finite, and the ambitions of nations were not. When the guns of World War I roared, governments abandoned the gold standard overnight. Paper flooded the world once more, and faith became rationed, spent, and strained. After the war, inflation devoured nations whole. In Germany, a wheelbarrow of marks could not buy a loaf of bread. Paper money became what it had always been, a symbol of trust, stripped bare of meaning. And yet, from the ashes, new systems arose. Central banks, credit systems, international trade agreements, all designed to manage the one resource that mattered most: confidence. Humanity had finally understood what the clerks of the exchequer knew centuries before: that money was not metal, nor paper, nor wood. It was faith, organized and recorded. As the century advanced, technology changed the form of that faith again. Machines replaced ledgers, telegraphs became teletypes, paper gave way to numbers glowing on screens. The 20th century was the death of material money. We stopped seeing our wealth. We started trusting it existed somewhere. Invisible, digital, dispersed. And yet, despite all our progress, we never solved the oldest problem: how to keep faith when there's nothing left to hold. The more complex the system became, the easier it was to forget what money truly was. Banks became too big to fail, markets too fast to understand. And once again, like in the age of wood and wax, the entire system rested on a single fragile idea: trust. When that trust wavered, the world shook. The crashes of 1929, 2008, echoes of the same ancient pattern. The materials change, the emotion doesn't. Wood burned, paper tore, screens blinked out. But doubt was timeless. The tally stick's simplicity, lost in time, now seems almost divine. It was honest because it had to be. It was slow, human, and uncheatable. You couldn't forge the grain of a split stick. You couldn't counterfeit the feel of truth. Perhaps, in our quest for progress, we lost something precious: the physical connection between trust and touch. Today, we swipe cards, tap screens, and move numbers that represent lifetimes of work. But few stop to ask what any of it means. Few wonder what connects them to the unseen promise behind the glow. It is here, in this age of abstraction, that the lessons of the tally stick return, not as nostalgia, but as prophecy. The wooden ledger reminds us that every economy, however vast or digital, begins in the same place: two people agreeing to believe in each other. And so the history of money comes full circle. From the notches of wood in medieval halls, to the ink on contracts, to the code in machines. Value is not in what we hold, it's in what we agree to trust. The tally stick was never just a record of debt, it was a reflection of ourselves. Our desire to make meaning, to measure fairness, to bind promises into something real. It stood for something greater than currency. It stood for civilization's first shared language: belief. And as we move deeper into an age of invisible wealth and intangible value, perhaps it's worth remembering that our future may depend not on what we create, but on what we choose to believe. The 21st century began with a whisper, not of wood or parchment, but of code. Once again, humanity stood at the edge of transformation. A new ledger was emerging, not carved, not printed, but written in electrons. The tally stick had recorded trust in wood grain. The banker had recorded trust in ink. Now we record trust in algorithms, invisible, silent, and ceaseless. Each era of money carries the fingerprints of its predecessor. The notches became columns. The columns became numbers. The numbers became data, lines of code that move faster than thought. Today, our wealth exists in circuits and clouds. Our debts live in databases. The marketplace is no longer a square filled with merchants, but a global network humming with invisible trade. Every second, billions of promises cross the planet. Contracts, payments, credits, and debts. All unseen, all intangible, all built on faith that the system will keep its word. Once you could hold your wealth in your hand, a tally stick, a coin, a note, solid, physical, proof of value. Now your wealth is light, zeros and ones, signals racing through glass fibers buried deep in the earth. The irony is as profound as it is poetic. Our systems have never been faster, smarter, or more complex. Yet they remain as fragile as they were in the age of wood. Because beneath every transaction, every password, every encrypted code lies the same human question. Do you trust me?